Chapter 14. The Time to Act. Clover watched the remainder of the butterflies disperse, leaving only the faint blue hues of magic's aftermath, a view he couldn't turn off anymore. The image of Callista's face just before the butterflies hid her from view, the desperation in her eyes, the brutal honesty of someone with the weight of the world upon their shoulders. Hero Complex was right, Clover said to himself.
She did seem certain of her allegiance. However, human kinships are fickle at best.
Graham chimed in to Clover's dismay. She did, Clover said in the ghost of a whisper. Clover sat with his back to the cold, damp stone wall, pulling out his phone. It was damaged and on a low charge, but worked for the moment. He turned it on and looked on his news app of preference, one he used to keep tabs on the trails for the criminals he spared. Clover absent-minded tapped on the first live stream he saw, the weight of the last 24 hours still heavy on his mind. Clover saw a massive beast with several tangled heads towering over everything surrounding it, and at its feet was a girl bathed in gold light. Calysta leapt from place to place and summoned large waves of golden light with each swing of Excalibur. Each swing made the hydra stumble, but it seemed all her efforts would be wasted.
She has massive willpower and the strength to back it up. But that seems to be prey best hunted as a pack,
Graham said, echoing Clover's own thoughts. Clover watched as Calysta flipped off one of the hydra's legs, and onto its back, one of the monumental heads of the beast rushed to Calysta. As the open maw of the beast engulfed Calysta, and with what sounded from the stream like a crackling in the air and a golden sparkle, the head was eviscerated in a blast of golden light. The hydra flailed, shaking Calysta off, sending her crashing into a large stone structure from ages past. With a roar from the remaining 5 heads, the severed neck of the hydra split in two, and 2 brand new heads formed from the sickening mess. The hydra stopped its flailing tantrum and looked towards the girl who was struggling to get up. Clover turned off the live stream and sat with his face in his hands. The great heroine was failing to slay the beast he had been asked to help her with.
What do you plan to do?
The voice sounded calm and rehearsed, as if Graham was testing Clover's resolve. I guess we're going to help them, Clover said as he stood. Will we be able to reach them in time? Clover wondered aloud. Covering such a distance would be a feat to be proud of, and even with the formidable power Graham granted him, Greece was still far outside his range of transit.
I doubt that will be an issue.
As Graham's words faded from Clover's mind, a black butterfly flew past his line of sight, leaving behind a trail of blue, due to the magic tracking sight he inherited from Graham. Vidin, Clover said as more butterflies arrived, circling around Clover en masse.
It seems your friend was listening in,
Graham said as the world around Clover faded to black in the blizzard of obsidian wings, and once it abated, Clover was before Vidin. Clover rushed to him. Vidin was collapsed amongst an old, ruined structure that was little more than a stone wall. Sweat drenched the man's face, balanced precariously on the edge of unconsciousness.
Clover, Calysta needs... We need...
Vidin incoherently stuttered in his exhausted state. I know. I'm here now, Vidin, Clover said, trying to channel any of the determination he saw in Callista's eyes. Clover knelt and laid Vidin down, taking his hoodie off and placing it under his head as a pillow. The wind assaulted Clover's bare arms as he stood, summoning the slick physical manifestation of Graham to his left hand. Pain shot through Clover as his developing wing immediately formed into its full form, and another sprouted from his back, the black scales forcefully expanding and rearranging to better equip him for battle. Despite the agony of the metamorphosis, Clover didn't cry out. Tears didn't well within his eyes. He merely breathed, the black-blue flames lacing each exhaling of oxygen. The way he was now, he couldn't be with his siblings, couldn't be there to help them with mundane things like homework or school lunches, but he would provide them with whatever they needed to survive, and a world to live their lives in. A single tear threatened to break through and make its way down Clover's face, just to be evaporated by a breath. Clover looked out. Calysta was still standing, still fighting a hopeless battle she had no hope of winning. Despite the presence of hope, despite the slim chance at surviving, let alone achieving victory, the determination in her eyes didn't waver, and neither did her beaten and bruised body. The hydra raised its massive foot to crush the bloody and tired girl who stood in defiance of fate's whims, trying desperately to catch her breath.
Time to act, Clover.
Graham began, but Clover was already on his way. With a mighty flap of his new wings, he sped across the landscape at an otherwise unachievable speed. And by the time Graham finished his statement, he had already grabbed the unaware Calysta and slid to a stop several dozen feet away. The reverberations of the hydra's foot colliding with the ground was like a thunderclap. The force of the sound alone caused nearby trees to fall and the wildlife to cry out and flee. Clover looked down to the girl in his arms that he had rescued, the girl who now smiled at him with a kindness that was so alien to him that he felt guilty for being gifted it.
Thank you,
she said. Clover knew, after all she had said, the promises she made, and the time she spent trying to help him, her thanks was undeserved. Well, I can't let you off the hook this quickly. You still have to help me return to normal, Clover said sardonically as he stood her back up.
I see. Guess I'll refrain from selfishly dying in glorious battle then,
Calysta said, with the ghost of a smirk upon her lips.
As you can see, I saved you plenty of fighting,
she continued, motioning to the Titan before them, the beast that now peered down at them, all of its heads focused solely on them. We'll have to cut all its heads at once, Clover said to Calysta.
It's easier said than done. I cut one, and even that was a challenge and a half,
Calysta said with a huff. We'd need to come at it from the base of their necks. The bases of their necks are closer together than any of the individual heads are, Clover said, twirling Graham in his hand as he thought.
He's a very clever one,
Excalibur chimed in.
Oftentimes too much for his own good,
Graham said in a smug tone.
I'll go left and you go right?
Calysta asked, having regained much of her composure. We'll meet on opposite sides of the necks, Clover said with a nod. But before he could take a single step, Calysta was already rocketing at the hydra like a wisp of golden flame in the breeze. Heaving a heavy sigh, Clover flapped his wings once more, rocketing over the landscape at a pace that far outmatched Calysta. Smiling at Calysta as he passed her, he moved to the right side of the monster with another well-placed movement of his wings. Using his new limbs came as naturally to him as the use of those he was gifted with at birth.
Incoming!
Clover heeded the suggestion immediately, moving to the side with a mid-air roll as one of the hydra's mouths collided with the ground in an attempt to devour him whole, the closing jaw pulling up large chunks of rubble which seemed to melt down into sand that leaked from between the beast's teeth. Picking up speed, Clover flapped once more, taking to the air. It took a noticeably higher amount of effort, but Clover refused to be constrained by the powers that held him to the earth. The head angled to look at him as a sickly green light began to shine from within the hydra's gullet before being expelled as an emerald inferno. The torrent of flames dwarfed the size of most tornadoes that Clover had seen pictures of, and it was coming straight at him. Inhaling, Clover thought about the beast before him, thought about what it would do to his siblings if given the chance, thought about his life in its entirety. Then, with a defiant scream, he unleashed his own sea of flames. As the green and black oceans of fire met, the terrain behind Clover was charred and lit ablaze, and the terrain behind the hydra's head began to melt and break down into sand.
Good. Allow all your anger to feed the flames.
Clover was surprised by the vote of approval from Graham, the sword that caused his life to come to this, the catalyst of his latest bout of suffering. Though the blame couldn't be just placed on the tool he wielded. In truth, it was just as much his own fault, but he despised both. Before he was aware of it, his blackened flames had engulfed much of the hydra's head and side. Ceasing the blaze, Clover flew at the base of the necks at breakneck speed, holding Graham skyward. Another dark inferno burst into life, this time around Graham's blade, a powerful and controlled fiery aura around Clover and the sword. Swinging the blade at the necks, Clover unleashed a mighty wave of black blaze that ripped through one neck after another. Clover felt anxiety as his attack lost power and mass as it cut through each neck, until it finally tapered out halfway through the final neck of the beast. As the amputated necks began to quiver and tear, a wave of golden light ripped through the remaining heads. Looking through the radiant golden light of warmth, Clover saw Calysta. As the hydra's movements slowed to a stop, it collapsed with a cataclysmic crash that made Clover's ears ring. Then there was quiet. Clover flew in Callista's direction. She had been in midair when she launched her final attack. Clover grabbed the falling, unconscious girl's hand and gently lowered her and himself to the ground before letting Graham fade from his hand. As the sword left Clover's grip, he felt the weakness fill him, and he too descended into the void of unconsciousness.